Hey guys, it's Sarah Cray with Let's Make Art, and we like to do watercolor tutorials, and we do a new one every single week. This week, we're doing the Nebula. Lot of color, lots of fun, lots of different techniques. I have a couple guests, so Keenan always is actually here, so it's not that exciting. Really
I live here.
You live here.
It's got that hammock in the back. That's not just for looks.
It's because we don't pay you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's actually your home.
People have to have the strangest image of me. Doesn't get paid. He lives in a hammock at the store.
So Keenan runs our cameras. We talk back and forth because we like that, and he's funny sometimes. And then we have Jessie here, who is my friend, and she is a wonderful, talented artist. And she here has a, what journal is this? Is this a Moleskine?
Mm-hmm. The watercolor one.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
So she has the Moleskine watercolor journal, and she is going to be doing the tutorial along with me, but she's going to be doing it in her watercolor sketchbook. So the fun thing about these tutorials is you can use them for anything. And I like to do a lot of stuff in my sketchbook, and so she'll just show you how you can shrink it down or just like make it to whatever you need. Great?
Cool.
She'll also ask questions if she has any questions, or tell me to slow down because I tend to talk and paint fast, and I'm sorry about that. I'm working on it.
We added a pause button for those that might fall behind.
But there is a pause button if I do paint too fast for you. You can just pause that little baby till you can catch up. Okay, so in this tutorial, we are going to do this in 4 steps. So our very first step is actually just kind of sketching or taping our area. Our second step, we are going to do our color change. So you can see there's a pretty strong color change here. So we're going to start with like a blackish blue, then we're going to go to blue, and then we're going to go to purple, and then we're going to go to red, and then we're going to go to orange. So that is all going to be done in step 2, and we got to work fairly quickly, but it's okay because it's supposed to be messy. Step number 3, we're going to let that dry, and then we're going to add our stars. Step number 4, we're going to let that dry and do our treetops. So 4 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4. We are using 5 colors. I had to count them.
Do you usually do your oath before you start painting?
Well, I usually do the colors first and the supplies,
Oh, okay.
and then we're going to do our oath and our warm-up and then go into it.
I just really need that sometimes. So
You're like, when are we going to do this? Okay, so the colors we're using are black.
Did you push your palette up just a skosh?
Palette or paper?
Palette.
Palette.
Perfect.
Okay. And then we have space blue. Space blue.
I thought you were going to say sludge.
Sludge. And then we have rose red. And then we have tangerine. And we also have our bleed proof white, which came in our November subscription box for fun new things for you to try. So hopefully you guys are having lots of fun with that. I'm just going to leave it in its case. You're welcome to scoop some out and put it on your palette if you choose to do so. And just so you guys know, it is more like a paste. It's going to have a very different consistency than the liquid watercolors, which is why we packaged it the way that we did. Okay? Okay. So I'm going to leave that there for our warm-ups. Let's do our oath. So if everyone can raise their right hand.
Keenan's ready.
Thank you, Alexis. And repeat after me. I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise not to compare my work.
I promise not to compare my work.
And I promise to have fun.
And I promise to have fun.
Thank you. And I like starting that way because sometimes we get in our heads before we start creating, we think things have to be perfect, or we think we have to be the best, or we think it needs to look exactly like what we're trying to paint. And that's not the point of creating. And also I would like to say that we have a fellow artist here with us, and sometimes we put more pressure on ourselves when people know that we're artists, that we think that they expect a lot from us, and then we're like stressing out, because I definitely feel that way. I'm sure Jessie sometimes feels that way. So if that is the case for you guys, I just want you to know, no pressure here. We don't care, it doesn't matter. We're all friends.
Yeah.
We're here to support, listen, and laugh.
Yeah.
Have fun.
Have fun. Okay, we're gonna do our warm-ups. So I'm gonna go over 3 different techniques. And our first technique is called wet on wet, which is one of the funnest techniques with watercolor. It's very accidental. It's very, you're gonna get funky things going on, but a lot of it is just letting it go and letting things, you know, do their thing. So I'm gonna start off with getting my round 6. I'm gonna dip it. Oh, I didn't talk about paintbrushes. We're using a round 6 and a round 2. Princeton Heritage Series 4050, excellent brushes. If you're having issues with your bristles falling out, it's probably because you're not using correct brushes or higher quality brushes. So these are great. They're on our website, letsmakeart.com. Okay. So get it wet, hit it off the side of the cup so it's not too wet. And I'm going to start with actually doing a light wash. So I'm going to grab a little bit of the tangerine. These are warm-ups, so you can do whatever you want. And I'm going to get an area wet just with that light wash. And then while this is wet, I'm going to pick up the same color or a different color, it doesn't matter. And I'm just going to drop, I can go along an edge, I can just drop it in. But I just want you guys to see what it's like putting a wet brush onto a wet surface. So you can see that it will bleed, it will move, it's going to start creating different textures. If you do water drops, that's going to create more textures and blooms and hard lines. So yeah, it looks like we did some water drops there.
Oh, I think I used the wrong side of the paper.
Oh, well that's
Doesn't
okay.
matter. Okay.
With this paper, that's a great point, Jessie. We're using Canson watercolor paper. There is a top side to it, which it just has a little bit more texture or tooth to it. However, I have accidentally used the back side of the paper many a times. It doesn't really matter. So it's not a huge deal.
I'm into it. I'm gonna do it.
Okay, great. So this is called wet on wet. So it could be done the same way with just clean water. If you wanted to use just clean water and then drop in water drops, you can do that. It can be done with a wash and then dropping in paint or water drops. It's the same.
Those color combos make me think of a peach.
Oh yeah. A peach sounds so
I
good
know.
right now.
Peach
This is a
knee-high is
fresh-
my.
Like a
Juicy
fresh, juicy, sweet.
Yes.
We're past peach season.
But have you had a
So
peach
far.
knee-high soda? Because that's my favorite soda.
No.
I don't know what knee high is.
Can we find it in Hamilton?
Not in Hamilton.
But probably in
But I think
Missouri.
it's
That's
Cracker Barrel?
shocking.
Okay,
Possibly.
okay. That's shocking. You mean they don't carry it at Subway? That's what we got.
We had a bakery.
We did.
So
Okay.
satisfying to watch it disperse.
And this is where it's really fun to let things just kind of go. But if you have a tendency to want to control every element, this technique is a little bit harder for you. So I would encourage you to play with this and then appreciate the differences you can get instead of having expectations in your mind of what it should be. Because it's going to be different every single time. Look at the difference between mine and Jessie's. You know what I mean? But it's still pretty cool. Okay. The next thing we're going to practice is just a color change because that is actually step 2 of our project and kind of a big deal. So when you do color transitions between colors, you want to make sure that you work fairly quickly. If you take a lot of time in between doing the color transitions, it's going to be harder for you to kind of blend the colors together. So I am going to practice just from blue to red. Now, if you guys are familiar with color theory, when you mix blue and red together, you usually get purple. So that's what I'm going to try and do here, go from blue to purple to red. So you can pre-mix a little on your butcher tray. So I grab some blue, I'm going to grab a little bit of red, and have a purple ready to go. Okay, so I'm going to grab my 6, I'm going to grab a little bit of the blue, and just kind of do some swatches back and forth, like so. And then I'm going to grab my purple. And when I'm going to overlap my blue and my purple, but not the entire way because I want some of the blue to stay pure blue.
And you started at the bottom and worked your way up?
Yeah. If you want to start more in the blue and work your way down, that's fine. I started on the bottom and worked my way into the blue, I think. There's not a right or wrong way. I mean, I don't think there is anyway. And then I'm kind of working back the blue and the purple line where they meet, so it kind of blends a little bit more, while keeping in mind that there is at least some portion that needs to stay that pure blue, or else it will not Stay pure blue.
Wait,
There it is.
did you put more blue in it when you worked it, or you just moved your brush?
I think I just moved my brush. But
Okay,
if you
so-
need to put more blue in it, it's fine if you need to pick up more color. Okay. So I got my purple, and then now I'm going to grab my red. And I'm going to start, give myself a little bit of space between my purple and red, start there, and then work my way into the purple. Let that overlap. But again, not going all of the way, because we want to keep some of it the pure purple. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Very nice. So that's just how I do color transitions. If you have found another way that's easier for you, I say go for it. Artists or people are going to tend to different ways of doing things, and I am a huge fan of doing whatever works for you and not like trying to be all, you got to do it this way. Yeah. I'm not like that. So do whatever works for you, but that is the way that I do it and how I will do it in this tutorial. And the very last thing that we are going to work on is called wet on dry. And so essentially it's if you painted an area already and then you're going to paint on top of that area, but the bottom area is dry. So if your previous warm-ups that we did with our wet on wet are dry, my right one is, so I'm going to work on that. And this is what we're doing for the trees. So I just want to show you, I'm going to switch to my 2 since this is a small area, so I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. But when an area is dry and you paint on top of it, you can do sharper lines that do not bleed out. See how that like leaf is keeping its shape? That's what we want. So if you're ever doing detail work, finishing touches, or especially in landscapes, usually you want your foreground or what's closest to the viewer to be sharp and in focus, and that's how we communicate that it's closer to you. So when you're doing wet on wet, that's usually more for things that are in the background because they're going to blend, they're going to be fuzzy, they're not going to be crisp. With wet on dry, those are going to stay crisp. So, we good?
Yeah.
Oh, I just realized we should probably practice trees. Keenan's like, yes.
Always practice trees.
Okay, so I'm going to use my round 2 and how I like to do trees. And there's many different types of trees that have many different shapes. So please be kind to yourself when you're doing trees. When I do my trees, I'm going to start with the trunk, like so. And what you want to keep in mind, our trees are traditionally thicker, like these kinds of trees. What are these kinds of trees? Fir trees?
Evergreen.
Evergreen?
Sure.
I don't know my trees.
Christmas?
I have this conversation every single time I do trees, and
Yeah.
I'm sorry that you are watching this. that I don't know what trees are. Okay, moving on. So they keep a triangle shape. So whatever marks you make, you want to make sure that they're smaller and more narrow at the top, and then your shape of your tree gets wider as you go down, so then it's triangular. I do little like branches. So here's branches coming off, okay? So these are things kind of sticking out from trees. And you can see that my dashes get longer as I go down. So at the top, they're short little things, and then as I go down, they get a little bit longer. And it's just a reminder of me that branches are coming out of this tree and where like they would kind of part. And then I'm going to do little marks. So I'm going to grab some black and I'm going to do dashes. And I'm going to kind of follow the shape of my trunk and my branches that I already put down. Like so. And these dashes are going to overlap and they are not going to be perfect in size. The dots, the dashes are going to change shape. Yep. Yep. You want to make sure that you're also doing dashes down the trunk of the tree too, because when you think of a tree, our brain likes to tell us things that they're perfectly flat and two-dimensional, but in fact trees are three-dimensional. So not only do they have branches coming out on the sides, they have branches coming out towards you because they're three-dimensional, they go around. So you want to make sure that you're putting these little They're not called leaves. Needles.
Needles.
These little needles on the front too, and covering kind of the front of the tree. There will be gaps, which is why I'm doing dashes instead of filling the entire thing in, because the needles are small. There's air in between the branches and the needles, so that's why I'm doing dashes. There are some trees that are so thick and heavy that they're solid, and there wouldn't be as many dashes or spaces in between. Yeah, very nice. Very nice. And just again, I want to say there are some trees that are way funky looking and lean sometimes, or maybe they do have gaps in them. So like maybe this one only has a little bit of needles at the top, and then the branches get thicker along the bottom. There's so much variation in nature that I don't want you to be upset at yourself if these turn out different than mine. Okay, now we're ready to paint. Keep your scratch paper handy if you need it. So step one is just kind of outlining or taping off where we need to. I just use blue masking tape for it. I would like to say my little, what is that word?
Caveat.
Yeah, is that right?
Side note?
Side note. Yeah, okay, side note, caveat,
Yeah.
both are great words, thank you. That sometimes I use tape so I can get a clean edge, but I have noticed that sometimes depending on how much water or paint I use, it doesn't always keep a clean edge. I am still trying to figure out why. So once I figure that out, I will tell you. But just so you know, it might bleed a little bit, and when that happens to me, I just change the line. But just know that that is a possibility, and I can't figure out why it does that sometimes.
I have no idea.
I don't know either, but we'll find out.
It's
So
kind of fun surprise when you peel it back and be like, oh yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
a little bit.
you just never know.
You never know. Yeah, but the bleed-proof white could also help with that. Okay, I did a diamond-shaped. So if you have a ruler, if you want it to be exact, which I'm not going to take the time for it to be exact, but if you want to, I just kind of measured the size of the paper. So this is a 12 by 9, so half of 9 is 4.5, so I mark that, and I mark 4.5 up here, and then I mark half of 12, which is 6, and 6 over here, and then that way I know that it's even, and you can kind of measure it from there, but I'm just going to go loosey-goosey for it.
I don't see that ruler. I'm just gonna
Okay.
try.
Yeah, it's fine, it's fine. And make sure that when you're taping your ruler, your edge down, that you press it down all the way to make sure that it stays nice and tight.
Pencil.
How did you
Oh,
know?
oh, you can use my mechanical
I was
pencil.
trying not to interrupt you. He was paying attention.
I'm sorry,
He
I'm
knew.
sorry.
Oh,
Keenan,
you were paying attention. That's fine. That's great.
Keenan, you're really good at your job.
Thank you.
Impressed that he like read
Give
my
me
mind.
2 more years and then we will think about compensating you.
Done.
2
I
years.
don't even have to think
What
about
is
this.
the
Food
compensation
here.
for mind reading? I mean, I feel like that's a tall order.
Okay, so I got my bottom. Another way to do this is simply to draw a shape. You can do this in a circle instead of a diamond if you just wanted to outline a circle. You can do any silhouette. You'll notice later in the month that we are doing a wolf silhouette with a galaxy in it. So really you could do any shape.
Stand by for a sweet sound of that painting. You'll have to you have to tune in and listen for it.
Did you say a sweet
sound.
Sound?
Yes.
What does that
You
mean?
know, you have a lion, there was a roar.
Oh, yes.
It's gonna be great.
It is going to be great.
It's gonna be horrible, but it's gonna be fun.
I never heard a wolf or a coyote or whatever it was until I moved to Missouri. And I was like, pretty sure.
Definitely a coyote.
Yeah, you hear those coyotes.
The little coyotes.
Okay. Another thing that I would like to say is I used a round 6 and a round 2 for this project. However, if you have larger brushes, this is a great project to use a larger brush than a round 6 because we have a lot of area to cover. So I also brought along with me a round 10 to show you guys that you can use a larger brush too. Jesse's going to stick with the round 6. You can do it with the round 6. Just when you're painting bigger, it's usually easier to work with bigger brushes just to fill the space faster. So if you don't have a larger brush than a round 6 and you're interested in doing like bigger size paintings instead of really small ones, I would suggest looking into those and having one in your arsenal. Is that the right word?
Yes.
You did say arsenal. You guys are nice to laugh.
Listen, we're all about puns here.
That would be great.
That-
That should be a section on our website.
No, we are going to make an art case called The
The
Arsenal.
Arsenal?
It's coming.
I love that idea.
I'm into it. I'll buy it.
I absolutely would buy it.
Yeah.
Oh, I should have used our new water glasses.
Is it not too late?
Oh, do we have one?
Alexis is also my reader.
Look,
What do you mean the new art glasses?
we have glasses for your paint water that says, "This is your paint water."
So you don't have to drink it.
I have definitely drinking my paint water before and or dipped my paintbrush in the drink I was drinking.
It's too bad my cat can't read because she tries to drink my paint water too.
And these are non-toxic,
That's good.
so your cat's safe.
And
I
your
wouldn't
kids.
encourage, I wouldn't feed this to your cat, but it's not dangerous.
It's good to know.
So we're moving on to our color change. So I'm not going to start with straight black because when you start with straight black, when you add water to it, it turns it really gray, and I want this thing to be really colorful. So I'm going to mix my black and my blue for this dark blue, and that's how I'm going to start it. Okay, so I have this dark blue on my palette, and just starting at the top, you can move it down. I would like to say, admittedly, I was going for a Nebula. It is reminiscent of fire, which was not my intention. And I know that there's a lot of fires going on, especially in California where I'm from, which is really heartbreaking. So that was not my intention. If you want to use different colors, feel free to. I was going for one of those crazy night skies. So I'm going to stick with this, but just so you know, if you don't want to do the orange, you don't have to do the orange. You can just stay with the blues and the purples. Okay. We can share it. Okay. So I'm just going to start at the top. Just start filling in my space. Now you can use a little bit of water to help spread it around, but just remember that when you add water to watercolor, it automatically makes it a lighter value. So don't add crazy too much water if you want your night sky to appear really dark. Okay, and now, kind of going off to what we did on our warm-up, I'm going to grab some just blue and overlap that with my sea. And you can see my brush marks are messy. This is not a perfectly smooth, even wash. We have lots of texture. Oh, and we used salt. Keenan, can you see if there's a salt shaker over there? There should be.
How far down are you going, Mike?
I'm gonna go probably a third down with my blue. And if you gotta go back and introduce the dark blue in between a little bit more, you can. Okay, and then I'm just going to keep going. So after the blue, and if me and Jesse are sharing, so we're using a little bit more, but of course you can always add more to your palette. So oh, Jesse, I'm so sorry.
Oh,
I
it's
flicked
all
paint. I flicked paint on your journal.
I'm making it into something cool.
Yeah. Okay, and now I'm going to start mixing my blue with a little bit of red for a purple. Here, so this is a bluish purple. And that is what I'm going to start adding now.
Are you overlapping the blue again, or?
I am overlapping. So similar to what we did in our warm-up of these color changes, I'm going to overlap some of it, maybe not all of it, because I want different colors to poke out. Thank you. And I'm working too slow, so I'm going to work a little bit faster.
Yeah, sorry, Brian.
And then now I'm going to go to still purple, but I added more of the rose red to get more of a pink purple. And that's what I'm going to start introducing here. Remember, if you need to use a little bit of water to help the color spread out a little bit, you can. And also we don't, is it okay if I?
yeah.
Okay.
Use me as an example.
So we have some really strong lines going on here from where it's starting and stopping. So don't be afraid to go in there and really like mess it up.
Ooh.
And kind of mess up where those transition lines happen, because we don't want the transition to be so visible of having hard lines. So
I like that.
So like just go in there and kind of, you can see I'm being pretty messy with this, and that is intentional because then it's harder to tell where those transitions of color actually happen. Okay, so I'm still using this blue, this purpley, this pink purple. And now I'm going to transition to more of the red. And I'm now getting into the bottom third of my painting. Now again, color transitions are going to have different like points than mine. That's okay. It doesn't have to match mine exactly. So I'm starting to add kind of just the pure rose red.
Start at the bottom and work up, right? Like that.
Yep, yep. And then kind of mix in between where they align. And then I'm going to grab orange.
Because I've had an audio delay between actual time and my ear, I thought you said betwixt. You said mix between, but then I heard betwixt, and I just got really excited.
That's a great word.
But if you could work that in.
Can you tell me the definition of betwixt so
Yes, I
I
can.
go ahead and Google
Oh, wait,
that?
I have a thesaurus here.
Oh, good. Yes, somebody sent us a thesaurus.
Let me get that for you.
And you guys can decide how much orange, how much red, how much blue. Maybe you want more blue than the red and the orange. That's fine. This is your painting. Oh. And then I'm going to do, so I'm adding this, and you can make changes. So I'm like, gosh, I kind of missed, I feel like it should be darker at the top. So I'm going to do another layer of the black and the blue at the top.
Betwixt definition
Yeah,
is between.
between. Okay.
So,
Okay.
literally just between.
So I'm kind of doing another layer of paint to really darken.
Okay, I got a hard edge again. Is it too late for that?
Nope.
Edge? Just water and soften it?
Yeah, so when you get a hard edge, you're just going to take a damp brush and be more aggressive. Sorry.
I always like to have people tell me to be more aggressive when I'm painting. Not
Yeah.
in other parts of my life, but
You just got to be like, let me mess this up a little bit more. Yeah.
better.
Yep. So, but you got to be careful because even when you're blending,
Sorry.
no, don't be sorry. Even when you're blending, if you blend in a perfectly straight line, then that's just, that's the same. It's just moving it up a little bit more. So you're really,
Show me the ways.
you're just going to
Scrub it in another direction.
rub it in other directions. Don't let it be perfectly even.
I feel like this paper dries a little bit faster than this paper.
Yeah,
Good thing to know.
it does. And it's because it's a different kind of paper. But yeah, so like really like get messy in there when you're doing your different.
Thanks. I'm gonna make the top darker. Me too.
And I'm gonna do one more layer of blue. To make sure my colors are nice and dark. Now, I will say that you could do a really smooth wash with this same technique and get something really beautiful. So if you want to try this same project, because maybe you don't like the different things going on in the sky and it's just too much for you and you want it to be a nice smooth wash, you can absolutely do that. I just think it's fun sometimes just to like go crazy and like not care too much about having things be perfect. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is, while it's nice and wet, if you want these textures, if you can see in my reference, kind of like these explosions, this is where salt comes in. So I'm using McCormick's sea salt grinder. And now you'll never know if they're paying us.
No one will ever know.
No one will ever know. And then I'm just going to put a couple turns here and there.
What if we distorted your voice at that spot so it's like
Or just like blur it out and do a beep. Just do a beep over my mouth while that's happening.
That'd be so funny.
That would be funny. Maybe we should. I don't know if I'm allowed to say products like that.
I don't think it matters. It's just salt.
I feel like they would warn us and be like, please stop using our name. We do not support what you do.
Yeah, they would warn us, but maybe
Don't
they
you
didn't
just
plan
want
on
some more
us
salt, though?
using it, you know?
It would be smart for them if they're like, watercolorists love salt.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, yeah, we do.
Yeah.
How do you know if it's working? I mean, is this something?
Okay, yeah, sorry. Salt will not work right away. It takes a minute to dry.
Is
But
it wet enough, or
if your painting is too dry and you put salt on top of it, it's not going to do anything. All you got to do is re-wet your painting then. Just get it all wet again and then drop in the salt. Or you can do the salt in chunks as you go down. I just did it a little bit because salt is a really easy way to get tons of crazy textures, which is awesome. But what happens when you add salt is it pushes the pigment away from wherever the salt is. So if you use a ton of salt, it actually is going to take the color out of your painting because it's pushing the pigment away from the salt. You know what I mean?
You know what I mean?
So I just did a little bit here and there. You don't have to use it at all if you don't want to. Oh, and make sure that since we're using tape with the clean edge, you can see here that I didn't go all the way to my edge. But that's actually not a huge deal because I can do, the trees are going to be covering that.
I finished my orange. That's gonna be awesome.
You want to make sure you go at least all the way down because you can see that there's space in between the trees and you don't want that to be white. Okay, now is where we're going to introduce a little bit of white. Now you want to make sure your painting is wet for this. My bottom part has dried, so I'm just going to re-wet kind of the center area here. And I'm going to take some bleed-proof white and I'm going to drop in some white in my painting to get kind of this like, so this is kind of mimicking when there's a ton, I think, I don't know, so I'm just going to talk like I know. Like when there's a ton of stars in a place and they're small and far away, it almost looks like the sky is lighter there and it's like a chunk.
It's like the Milky Way.
Yeah.
Smoky.
Yeah. So that's kind of what we're trying to mimic there. But I will say that bleed-proof white is opaque. So it is going to give me a slightly different look wherever I put it. And because this is going across multiple colors, don't work back and forth too much or else it will turn into mud. You pretty much just have to drop it in and just be like, all right, that's going to do its own thing. And I'm just going to let it do its own thing and it's going to be great. Yep. Yeah, and you can help it move around if it's staying too much. You just don't want to like work up and down a lot. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh.
And then like smear it around.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. And if you want it to be more white in some areas, I just did a little bit, but if you want to do a little extra like.
Oh, I like what I see in there. It's a little burst of a cloud or something.
But just to show you, like I added white in my purple and then I went back down to my yellow and that purple hung onto my brush and stayed there. So I'm going to try and lift that just a little bit. But that's what I mean when I said don't go back and forth and then I just did it. That's what I meant not to do.
But now you can show them what to do when they did it.
So sorry about that. Yeah, good point, Chesney. I did that for educational purposes.
Yeah, so helpful.
Okay. And now we got to let it dry before we do stars. Okay? If you have a heat gun, which Jessie does, she's letting me use it. Well, we're going to use a heat gun.
So the one thing about heat gun is just get some distance because if you get right on it, then it'll just blow your paint around. So that's just
really? It's really strong, like a hair dryer.
So yeah, just start out farther away and then get a little closer and see.
Can I ask you what the difference between a heat gun and a hairdryer is?
Well, one's for hair, but just kidding. The heat is the setting for the high setting is much higher, I think, than the
For your hair.
the dryer. Yeah, because
Your hair would probably catch on fire.
Bad idea. Yeah.
Don't.
And it has a little light in it, so
Okay.
like you can see where you're
Oh,
going.
cool.
So then you don't like burn one spot or whatever.
All right,
I'd
I'm
like to
trying
add
it.
information. The light you see are the heat elements. And that gets really hot, like hot enough to bend PVC pipe.
Oh, this
Have
does?
you done that?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Oh, good to know.
Okay, so if you get a heat gun, it's not a toy.
Not a toy.
Don't touch this part.
Definitely not.
I honestly never used a heat gun because I just wait for my paints to dry, or I used a hairdryer. Because in my head, I'm like, they're the same thing. Not the same thing.
Well, I mean, you can use a hairdryer if you
You
have
can
one.
use a hairdryer.
Yeah.
You can. Okay. Is this right?
A little further away.
Further away? Like this far?
Just start back there so then you can adjust.
Okay. I'm going to turn it off, and then you can use it on yours.
We'll do that.
Jesse, calm down. I didn't realize there were
Whoa,
different
yeah.
settings. Okay, I would like to point out that if you can see mine, you can see that there's a pretty strong bloom right here. And that happened because I re-wet the area to put the white paint in. Now, if you do not want that to happen, I'm telling you too late. But if you do this again, or if you watch through this tutorial before you actually paint, you're gonna wanna work quick then. So you're gonna wanna work fast enough to where your bottom area is still wet enough when you get to the white part that you can just put it in without having to re-wet the area. I stopped and chatted too much, which is why I had to re-wet it. But honestly, I'm not mad about it because I think it adds a different texture and a different element. Jesse's, that didn't really happen. I think you have a little bit of blooming on that side, but it's not as central as mine, but I think
But
that's
also
cool.
A little bit of my white in the middle.
Yeah. It's just different things. And this is where watercolor is fun and sometimes can be frustrating and sometimes can be exciting because you never really know what's going to happen. Okay. Now let's do our stars. So you can see where my salt has kind of pushed out. You can see it on yours too. I just did a little bit because I didn't want it to be too crazy. So for our stars, we are going to flick white paint. Please remove any expensive things around because you do get paint everywhere.
Like your computer monitor.
Like my computer. If you look at my computer monitor, there's white paint all over it.
Not only is it not a touch screen, but it's also not a piece of art.
Kim was making fun of me the other day because I was touching my computer screen. And he was like, is that a touch screen? And I'm like, no. And I'm
I
like,
had no idea.
he's like, I know it wasn't. It just bothers me when people touch their computer screens.
Well, he really likes it when you touch his screen, I found out. He loves it.
Okay, so I'm gonna grab my paintbrush. I'm gonna get it wet. I'm gonna get white. Okay,
Bigger paintbrush, like not the smaller one, right?
I would do the bigger one.
Okay.
Okay, now your first flick is going to inform a lot. So if you're nervous, like, because sometimes you do a flick and there's like a ton of big blotches and everything. So sometimes you can do a test flick on your palette, or if you have your, I'll use this, my little work paper, and I could just flick and I can see. That's pretty good. I'm pretty good with that size. If you have a lot of water on your brush and white paint and you flick, then your paint blotches will be bigger. If you want smaller flicking, like smaller dots and not as much paint, your brush just won't be as wet, okay? So I'm gonna wet it a little bit, and then I'm just going to flick around.
Like everywhere?
Everywhere. I'm doing it everywhere. It's gonna show up more in the darker areas, obviously. And if you want like a strong gathering of, because you know how stars, they're not evenly spread. There's some that are closer together and bigger and things like that. You could do it a lot in one spot, maybe a lot in one spot over here. And then,
This is like my favorite
It's the best part. And all of the sudden, your funky wash looks way cool. Like, just like that. It's so great. Now, to add a little bit of extra, if you want, what I did is, and you can like pin poke bigger ones. So if you're like, that's a bigger one, and that's a bigger one, I did that, and then I took my 2 and I just smeared it so it seemed like it was a shooting star. But I would suggest doing that maybe in the darker areas so you can see it. Maybe if there's not a lot of texture or blooms going on. Because if you do it in an area where there's a lot of stuff going on, you're not really going to be able to see it. I'm going to do one more, maybe here. Okay, maybe one more over here. Do as many or as little as you want. Can I say that I thought I was really proud of myself for calling this a nebula instead of a galaxy? Because I guess the galaxy project I did is actually a nebula. And then I showed my husband, who low-key loves astronomy. He was just like, he's like nebulas you can't really see. He's like, because you can see the tops of trees, it's not really a nebula. He's like, nebulas are like out in space. Like you wouldn't be able to see it simultaneously with the tree line. And then I told him to please don't crush my dreams. Yeah. And we moved on and I called it a nebula still.
Whatever you want.
This is my world I'm creating. Maybe you can see trees and nebulas simultaneously. Yeah. I want to live in that world.
Absolutely.
There's Photoshop. That for sure is a picture somewhere.
I'm much taller in that world.
Okay. So you can do as many or as little stars as you want. It's completely up to you. I did not focus on doing the stars a ton on the bottom because your bleed proof white is opaque. When you put black watercolor over it, it tends to stay kind of gray. So I kind of left this area a little bit blank. There's some there, but it's not crazy. If I went crazy with my white there, then when I try to do my black trees, they would not stay black. So, and then we're gonna wait for that to dry. And then we'll move on to our very last step, which is our tree tops. Now, of course, how you want to do your trees are completely up to you. Maybe you don't even want to add trees. That's absolutely, you're right. You can do different trees, whatever you want. I did mine kind of to mimic this triangle shape instead of doing it just across. If I did it straight across, I could have, but that will create a very strong implied line along the middle of my composition, which I didn't really want to do. I wanted to keep it feeling the same. But you can use that knowledge to your advantage if you do want it to feel, have implied lines. You can absolutely do it straight across. You can move up the line. If you're like, no, I really want to kind of like mess up their line of vision right here and have a lot of interest going on here, I'll do it straight this way or straight, you know what I'm saying. Okay, so I'm going to switch to my round 2. I'm going to make sure the bottom part is dry. And I'm going to grab some black and I'm going to just start doing my trees. And because I want to stay within this kind of shape, then the ones on the bottom are going to be short and then the ones on the side are going to be tall. So you can just start doing your trunk. And if you want to do a couple trunks at a time, you can. And then just start doing your branches. Another thing I would like to say is when we don't realize it, but our brain loves patterns and it loves making patterns. And so if you don't pay attention to this, you will find that your trees are going to be perfectly evenly spaced between each other. So I'm going to ask you to purposely pay attention to the spacing of your trees and make sure that it's not perfectly the same, because your brain is going to do that automatically. So you've got to kind of mess it up, because that's a little bit more true to what we would see in nature is they overlap and they run into each other. They wouldn't be perfectly spaced.
Do you want to push your paper up like 2 inches? Perfect.
Good.
A little more than...
More?
No, you're fine.
Okay. Keenan, tell me another cool silhouette that would be cool here instead of trees. Go.
Pine cone.
Pine cones? Or just one pine cone?
Pine cone.
What if you did the silhouette of E.T.? Like on the movie cover on the bike. My idea was better than yours.
Well, pine cone was Eleanor's idea, but it's fine. She wanted to name a fish we had pine cone.
That is great. Did
She
you do
named
it?
She named it apple instead.
That's really great. I kind of like pine cone a little bit better.
I do too. It's great.
Okay, and you're just gonna keep going. Sorry, sorry, Jesse. I'm like, paint your thing, as I'm blocking the paint from her.
Why don't you have any painting?
Why don't you have any?
I am
Why are you?
to your
Why are you only
three
doing
ratio.
one tree?
Why are you still on step 2?
Why are you so slow?
So basic.
This would be a good one to put a quote on,
Ooh, this would be a good one,
especially with bleed proof white.
especially with Blue Proof. I was just saying what you were gonna say.
That's true.
You can do. Nicole didn't she do stars, like a shine star one?
Mhm.
That would be a great one to do a little bit of both. I don't know if I feel brave enough to try and do
Yeah, I don't think I would do it, but I struggle with trees and words, so. Can't
You're like,
even spell
those are my
witches.
2 worst things.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you want to make some of your trees really like barren, that's cool too. I'll do a couple of those so you guys can kind of see what that might look like, which is that little guy. Just a little, I mean, this is how trees are, you know what I mean?
This would be another cool one with power lines.
Oh yeah, that would be cool.
That'd be sweet.
Maybe like a spaceship, like a rocket, or an astronaut in white, floating with no trees.
Yes.
You get what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
You see what I'm
I
putting?
s-
You're
can-
picking up what
I
I'm
can
putting down?
picture that right now. I can see what you're painting. I feel like that was more clever than a Snicker, but that's fine.
I get it.
Okay. So I'm working really hard on making sure my trees aren't perfectly spaced.
Not being precious, I think, like, is what I have to think about. Like, it's okay, it's gonna be whatever. I'm
Yeah.
trying to make it precious.
Yeah, like I think the biggest thing is like, and one of the reasons as we paint and create more that we don't like get all scared about it is because I 100% know that this is not going to be the last galaxy sky night scene that I paint. So if it turns out not exactly how I want, who cares? Because I'll just like put it away and paint another one.
Yeah, and my journal isn't for me. It's just for me.
And the fun thing with painting in sketchbooks or doing it in your journal is it is private, so it doesn't have, you don't think like this is going to be up on somebody's wall, but it's also a great way to explore ideas. So if you're doing this in your sketchbook or your journal and you wanted to try something else with colors, one, it's smaller, so it's not as big as of a commitment, and two, it's really, that's the purpose, is to explore. So I've actually not been an artist who like sketches religiously. It's not, I don't have a ton of sketchbooks, but it is something that I've been doing, especially with working with Jessie Moore, who likes to do art journaling and sketchbooks. It's so wonderful to look back at different ideas that you've had or to just like explore and play.
That's a fun record. I used to think that, oh, that old sketchbook is not good, but now it's kind of a time capsule of my life, and I can see how much I've grown.
Yeah, and that's great for a watercolor journey, or if you're starting any kind of new hobby, is to be able to document your progress. I think is great too. But it's a fun little thing, and especially it's important now since my job is to create art. I need to make sure that I take time out to still have creative freedom, so then it doesn't feel like I'm only making stuff for work. You got to make sure you have pleasure in there too. So a lot of fun, a lot of playing, and a lot of experimenting. Maybe we should do a video showing our journals.
Ooh, yeah.
That would be fun.
That would be fun.
I actually find it extremely inspiring to look through people's like sketchbooks or art journals. You get to see some of their ideas. It's pretty fun. Maybe me and Jesse will have to do a video like that.
Yeah. I think this one is a little wonky.
Okay, I think my trees are done. Ooh, yeah, that's looking great.
I think they're different kind of tree than those trees. They're like, I was thinking Mississippi, like scraggly pine trees.
Oh, yeah. I have a hard time picturing exact things in my head and, when I'm painting, so that's why I'm just like, I don't know what kind of tree this is, I'm just gonna make it. But if you have a specific one in mind, or even a photo reference, that's super handy to have. So if you're like, I wanna do this kind of tree for sure, just pull up a picture of it, just take notice of its shape and the silhouette of it and things like that. Okay, so when you untape your paintings, you want to pull away from your painting. So I'm not starting on this side and pulling towards my painting. I'm starting on the side closest to my painting and pulling away. The reason for that is because if it does happen to catch and tear, that way it's pulling away from your painting and not into your painting, because that is very heartbreaking when your painting tears. But if it's just on the edge, like it's a little bit sad, but it's not as sad because your painting's still intact. So I'm just gonna gently and slowly pull away. Right here. Oh, I had only one little blip. That's not too bad. Okay, and then I'm gonna do this side. Oh, I got a little aggressive with my, see up there?
Oh dear.
I went past my paint. That's how crazy I was being.
Past your tape.
Past my tape. Thank you. That makes more sense. Thanks, Keenan.
I didn't realize you said something different.
Jesse's like, I'm on the same page with you. Past your paint all the time. I get it. Okay.
Sounds like you're saying pasture paint.
Pasture paint?
Past your bedtime.
Paint pasture.
You missed my joke. You said past your bedtime.
Yeah.
Pasture
Pasture.
bedtime. I get it. I get it.
Now I don't get it.
Oh, clean edge, clean edge. Oh, just about. Okay.
All right, I'm almost ready. This is really fun to paint trees.
It is.
I do not have that feeling with trees.
Well, I think I want to just keep adding detail, but maybe it's good that I stop. Okay, so pulling away, right?
Yeah. Oh, that is pretty darn good.
Crisp.
Nice and crisp. How'd yours do? Oh, pretty good. A little bit.
I'm okay with the blips as long as it's like blippy consistently. Oh, somehow I'm there.
We got a little bit more there.
Hmm.
That's actually, I feel like that's kind of cool though, because it's like bleeding out of your straight line composition. You know what I mean?
It is. Yeah.
One thing that you can do, like if this was a little bit bigger, I think how small this is, it doesn't really bother me. If it was a little bit bigger, honestly what I would do is I would take my paint and just move the edge a little bit to cover it and even that out so it doesn't stick out. You know what I
How
mean?
abrasive is the bleed-proof white? If you were trying to
Let's try it.
Oh yeah, what if I covered that little, because now it looks like a kite a little.
That's the
happened there?
coolest kite I've ever seen.
Okay.
You guys should just make it a kite.
That'd be awesome.
Try it. I'm going to try and cover this with my bleed proof
Ooh,
white
okay.
if you want to try and cover your yellow. So you would probably have to do it in layers.
Like a light layer and then a heavy layer? Or just
Like I would
build it
probably
up?
do a layer of white and let that dry for a second and then do another layer of white. But you also want to make sure that your bleed proof white is clean because it might have a color to it from previous paintings. But if you look at the ad I painted for this project, I had a pretty bad bleed, and in the ad I just moved my line up. But it's pretty fast, so I don't know if anybody saw it, but if you take the time to look at it. Now that edge covered pretty easy right there, that little blip. This is another Another thing that I do when I do have mistakes like that, and why I love prints and photo editing your work, is you can just edit that right out and it's like it never happened.
Deleted.
It is wonderful. So, okay, you ready to hold it up, Jesse?
Yeah.
Let's hold it up. Oh, our Nebula is beautiful. Oh, I love it. It's so cute, smaller too.
I know, it's adorable.
So great. So, if you painted this with us, thank you. Thanks for taking the time to paint with us. Jesse, thank you so much for joining me. Keenan, always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Never mind. If you painted this, I would love to see it. So share it. If you're on Instagram, you could tag us at Let's Go Make Art or hashtag Let's Make Art. If you're on Facebook, you can tag us, or we have a wonderful Facebook community that is separate from our business page. It's just meant for sharing our projects and what you're working on with watercolor. So if you want to see what other people are doing, how they approached it, maybe you want feedback, or maybe you're just not comfortable sharing it on your personal Instagram, but you still want to feel part of an art community, that is called Let's Make Art Watercolor. Wonderful place, very large. We're at like over 40,000 people now, I think. So lots of different skill levels there, but put yourself out there, be brave, try new things. Don't be afraid to switch it up. You don't have to do exactly what I do. If you have a sketchbook or a journal, you can try it in there. There's a lot of really fun things that you can do with things like that. I'm sure me and Jesse will show you more as we go along. And if you need any of these supplies, letsmakeart.com. We got you covered. Everything. That's all we got to say. Bye.